Greetings. This recording of the Future Trends Forum took place on April 17, 2024, and it was an unusual session. A typical Future Trends Forum session involves one or several guests with whom we converse for the hour. But this time we had a community session, and this was devoted to a specific topic, a specific national event. This was for the Day of Action. This was a day organized across the United States involving hundreds of events at colleges and universities in all kinds of states. And the idea was to organize to draw attention to the plight of academic labor under the Trump administration. Not like things were doing well in academic labor before Trump took office for the second time, but this day was to really draw attention to things that were getting even worse. So we hosted a whole series of great guests who had different points about everything from the plight of adjuncts to questions of tenure and governance to what different Trump administration policies were or might be doing. And the session was rich with passion, with ideas, with hope, and with a lot of coming together at that moment. I was really, really proud of how this worked, and I hope we can do this again. So, with all that as introduction, please enjoy the recording. Let me begin by welcoming everybody to the Future Trends Forum. I'm really excited to see you here today. We're dealing with, unfortunately, a very important subject, and it's one that we're doing, fortunately, on a day of a great deal of action. Because what we're doing today is a little unusual. What we're doing is we're meeting to explore a question of labor and a question of academic labor right now. And we're doing it today because by fortuitous day, this is when, as we've noted before, there is a National Day of Action for higher education. Now, I'll put a link to this in the chat. And this is a national effort to have people in academia stand up for academic labor. And when we think of academic labor, it's important to remember the huge amount of work that goes on to keep colleges and universities going. We have, of course, a wide range of staff, a lot of faculty who do all this work, and of course, all faculty, and students who are doing work as well. And we're doing this now in the face of a tremendous push from the Trump administration against higher education. We've talked about this before in previous meetings. We've had awesome guests who spoke to what the Trump administration is trying to do and succeeding to do with colleges and universities across the US. Some of you might know I do a regular YouTube series on this, but today I wanted to meet on this topic because of this National Day of Action. And to help introduce this Day of Action, I wanted to bring back one of our favorite guests, Jennifer Ruth, a scholar, a writer, an activist, and now a key point person in this Day of Action. Jennifer, why don't you turn your mic on and tell us who you are and what's going on?
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I can only stay for a little bit because we have a massive day of action here at Portland State. We've got a rally from 12 to 1. I've got to help them bring food into the room where we will then have a series of art building and also webinars that are tied to the day of action. But so I'm Jennifer Ruth. I'm at Portland State University. I'm in the School of Film. I'm a longtime AAUP activist. Also have written, co-written and co-edited a couple of books on academic freedom. And I'm part of the core organizing collective for the coalition. That's right, no protest without food, Greg. I'm part of the Coalition for Action in Higher Ed, the core organizing collective. So a lot of people think that the National Day of Action is an AAUP thing, and AAUP has been an incredible partner with us, sponsored, promoted, donated staff energy and resources. AAUP is absolutely on board. But so is HELU, Higher Ed Labor United, Debt Collective, JVP, Faculty for Justice in Palestine, Historians for Peace and Democracy. So Brian put the link to the National Day of Action in the chat, our main page, and we've got all of our sponsors on there, but it's quite a impressive, I think, list from Middle East Studies Association to Palestine Legal to Scholars for a New Deal for Higher Education. Anyway, but the group bringing it together, we've been calling ourselves Coalition for Action in Higher Ed, and we've been around only for 2 years. It started last year with NYU AAUP President Rebecca Carl, Amy Offner, President, University of Penn, when the attacks really started getting most ferocious, particularly at Penn and at and Harvard and other places. So it started then, and we've just grown. And so this year we had 100 events on campuses across the country last year. This year we're which, is not so much a testimony to the organizing collective as it is to the state of higher education right now and the attacks on higher education. We have over 200 events scheduled. And if you go on to, and actually, I have no idea if I'm going to be able to make this work, but this feels easier to me somehow than asking to share screen.
Oh,
This is probably not going to work. Okay, what I'd like you to do, yeah, it's not going to work. Okay, what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, is to click on that Day of Action chat link that Brian gave us, because if you go onto that main page, if you look just at the top, you'll see registering for webinars and stuff. But if you scroll down, we actually have a map that's pretty friggin' awesome. If you click on the different flags of the map, I really want you to see this if you're not already
oh, we
seeing
can see it. That's
yeah.
pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So if you click on any of those points, you're going to see what some group, some college, some university, some organization, community college, a couple of high school. We've got something going on in Puerto Rico, something in Hawaii. If you click on, you can just see what is organized. And then if you scroll down lower, you see we've got from Adelphi University to Yale. We've got events happening. And they range from organized watch parties for the 13 virtual programming events that CAHI, that's what we call ourselves, Coalition for Action in Higher Ed, CAHI has organized, which range from, we've got 13 different webinars. So I'm kind of rushing because I know I need to get out of here pretty soon. We've got webinars on displacement, college for all, why sanctuary campuses, doing university debt reveals workshop, why sanctuary campuses now, immigrants' rights defense workshop, fighting attacks on higher ed in red states, and more. So all of these are already organized with super impressive panels of scholars and experts that you can, as an individual, or as kind of a mobilizing or organizing thing with others, you can register to sign up and watch these webinars. So there's stuff like that. But there's also things like Howard University is part of their Day of Action. They started an encampment last night. And they've already put out a press release about the police repression of their encampment. There's going to be a massive rally at Foley Square in New York City. There's theater pop-up things. There's just it's boggles the mind, the creativity of the organizing if you scroll through. And we're going to try our best. We're a very scrappy group. There's not a ton of us who are in the core organizing collective, although there's a ton of us who are contributing. But we're asking people to send pictures, and we're collecting pictures from all over the country of different events that are happening. And I just want to mention one of the coolest things over the last week or so is that people just have been sending us just the flyers that they've made for their various events on their various campuses. And the flyers are so cool. I mean, if you think about the 1960s and the kinds of protests and the cool art that came out of that, we're going to have a collection of art out of this day that's going to be gorgeous. So there's a Google Drive folder where people can put pictures and flyers and all kinds of things. So there's a lot going on today. I highly recommend that even if you're not already part of an organized Day of Action, that you take a look at our virtual program. It's already started. So we've already had a couple of sessions already, but you can register for the virtual events online. And there's still a bunch of them to go, including a national teach-in at 4:00 my time, 7:00 East Coast time, that will feature Todd Wolfson, president of the AAUP. It will feature Asla Bali, who's been really critical in fighting the repression of Palestinian speech and academic freedom. So I highly recommend that if all you can do is watch the national teach-in, that you join us for that. I think that I've rushed through enough.
You've done tons, Jennifer. Because I'm a multitasking host, I just went on our discussion chat and said, here is Professor Ruth on fire, and I just shared a screenshot of this. Can you share in the chat the Google Drive for the art collection so people can find
That's great. Despite being a School of Film person who recently made a film. I'm actually a bit of a Luddite. So what you're asking for is kind of difficult for me to move between different tech things.
It's
So
okay. I'll ask on the Signal chat.
that's much better. There's some much sharper tech people on that Signal chat than me.
That's okay because you are a brilliant person and you are setting this up. I know we've only got you for a few minutes, so I'm trying to exploit you as quickly as I can. And friends, you all know how the forum works, or if you're new to it, I'm not the one who interrogates our hapless guests. You all are the source of our questions and comments. And so one of them has come from our dear friend Phil Katz, and I'll just note his avatar is a proclamation of support for independent colleges. And he says that this is an interesting list of actions. So many seem to be aimed at campus administrators rather than external enemies. Am I reading that list wrong?
I would say that you might be. On the only reason why I say that is that we've been organizing and getting the word out for campuses to organize things for over a year. So some of the early events, naturally, when we felt like when there was no sign that administrations weren't going to cave, weren't going to appease, weren't going to hand over student information, weren't going to defend their Middle East studies centers and their scholars, when there was when that looked like the writing on the wall, and it looked like the writing on the wall up to very, very recently, as you all know, up to very, very recently, a lot of the events organized probably were walkouts directly to, and are walkouts. Yeah, I remember being part of different conversations about should we do a walk to the administration? Should we be calling for campuses to walk at noon for a direct action to walk and protest outside their administrative offices? So there's going to be some of that, and I think that's appropriate, but there's also going to be some bigger kind of fighting Trump's cuts, fighting the attempts to use anti-Semitism as a cudgel to freeze federal funding for important research, et cetera. So there's going to be a mix of people calling on their own administration to step up and stand up, and also calling out the more broader national attack on higher ed, federal attack.
Well, excellent, excellent. First of all, thank you for that excellent answer. And Phil is in full form right now. Not only did he ask a great question, but he also shared an awesome resource of posters from student protest in Paris 1968, and it's from the excellent Open Culture website. So multiple points for Phil there. Um, we also have I guess, a comment or an observation, a bit of wisdom from our dear friend Vanessa Vale, who says that I hope a seasoned union organizer is there to tell the academics to talk less and listen more.
So I would just say that one of the cool things, in my opinion, about Coalition for Action in Higher Ed is that we have really forged strong connections with labor unions and with community groups. So, for example, here at Portland State, a lot of our speakers are not academics. They're people from the community who are fighting for immigrant rights, who are part of the labor or unions in the city. So it really is a pretty cool thing that I think does go against the grain of a typical academic day, in that people are organizing their own, mobilizing their own organizing sessions. They're talking to each other. They're using it as ways to build members and to talk to one another. So there's a lot more than just, I mean, the virtual programming is the sort of baseline. The virtual programming with experts who are speaking to these timely, important issues, that's the baseline. There's so much more organizing with labor unions, with student groups. We have many student groups who are going to be involved on our campus, and I'm sure that's true for many across the country. So it's not your typical academics lecturing others kind of day, by no means.
Nice, nice. Um, well, Vanessa, as always, it's great to hear from you, and I'm glad your connection is stable enough to ask the question. And thank you, Jennifer, for the very, very wise response. Um, in fact, I'll see if I can share this in the chat. One project did a collaborative poster on at I think Furman University, and let me see if I can share this. But I love the idea of a collaborative poster because it's one that multiple people get to work on at once. Yeah, I'll see if I can
Yeah.
grab
I mean, the
this.
spirit of the day is absolutely about coalition building and collaboration. because that's the only way we're going to be able to stand up to this incredible campaign of intimidation. And I do have to run now. But thank you so much, Brian, for letting me on to say a little bit about CAHI, what we call CAHI, Coalition for Action in Higher Ed.
Well, absolute
Bye.
pleasure with you. Good
Thank,
luck. Be
thank,
safe.
thank you.
So that was one of our guests, the excellent, as you can see, Jennifer Ruth. We have other folks here who'd like to share their thoughts. I do want to pass on one comment that comes from the hardest working editor in the higher ed business, Greg Britton, who says there's so much fear on campuses. I wonder how many people will not participate out of fear of surveillance and reprisals. Um, I'd love to hear from all of you, but on the in response to that, but just for one quick personal note, I had a number of people tell me not to offer this session today. I had people tell me that I should not participate because that they thought it would be bad to be seen in public, to be identified by a hostile administration. I took that very seriously, but thought that it would be better for me to actually use this platform to help support people rather than to be silent. But what do the rest of you think about this question of fear? And again, please either hit the chat box or just unmute yourself and step to the stage. See, that's tricky, Greg. This is a question about silence, so this just makes people have a harder time to answer. But Melanie Hogue says that looking at the number of registered events in Texas reflects concerns you're mentioning. Melanie, is that because the number is low? And Kenan, you're most welcome. Thank you for coming. While this tricky strategic or tactical question is on the table, thank you, Melanie. Yeah, it seems very quiet. I understand that. Tom Hames asks, how are we working to defend the broader idea of the community, the broader idea of the academy as a community of learning? Trump is all about divide and conquer. How is higher education defending that higher ideal? So I'll just add that question as a typical Tom, very deep question to the mix. Nicole Quike, and Nicole, I'm sorry, I hope it's Quike. If it's Quike, I'm terrible at last names. So this is a time when people like you and me, white men in particular, to stand up and offer solidarity to those who have more to fear. I hope so, Phil. I hope so, Nicholas. And George Station, hello, George. Glad you could make it. Out on the West Coast at California State University, George says, thank you for offering this session. It's important that people who are willing to show up in groups so that each person knows they're not alone in their concerns. Yes, this is one of the key points I want to make sure you all took away, is that there are a lot of people in higher education, students, faculty, senior administration, lower level staff, everybody who is concerned and frightened about what's going on. And it's important to realize that other people are, and we're here to support you. Vanessa says she just shared a Day of Action link and a reminder to register for the virtual. Very good. Glad to hear it. Now, Phil Katz, who is just continuing to be on a roll, says, what's the likelihood of campus conservatives collecting crowd photos? Or is that just paranoid? Tony Sindelar says that he responds by saying he thinks it's happening. I think many protesters from vulnerable groups attend wearing masks for that reason. And mask wearing is such a provocation, Phil answers. Phil, let me, if you could, if you feel up to it, you've got awesome headphones. If I could bring you up on, just turn on your camera. I'd love to see you up here. Put you on the spot right there.
Well, I'm not sure what I can contribute. I should, of course, say I'm speaking just for myself here, and not for my employer. But I'm very much, as my comments may suggest, of two minds here. I approve of all this action, but I do worry about it being seen by outsiders as such a confirmation of all the things that are under attack. So yes, I understand the mask wearing, but I also understand that every attack we've seen from the administration on a specific college has said mask wearing has to go, and certainly there's some difference of opinion about that even within the academy. So I'm very much of two minds. I want this to help, but I do worry that um, for some people it will be a confirmation of worst fears, and for other people it will merely be a um, you know a pat on their own backs.
Sorry, it does become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that respect. Um, but one thing is, though, that United States higher education is so vast. We have so many students, so many faculty, so many staff, that it's trivial to pick out one or several who are doing something that other people will find disagreeable. That's just part of the glory and the nature of academic freedom and a largely autonomous sector. Yeah, I'm just sharing this. I don't know if you can all see this in the chat. This is a poster from Furman University, a collective poster. So that's a fun example of this. What do the rest of you think? What are some of the risks we have that we're running by being in public like this, and what are some of the benefits that we should be thinking of? George Station adds that his campus has an otter statue dedication shortly, because they're all otters there. But they also have faculty union action for the National Day. So very, very good. And Keenan Salinero says that he has two friends, one of whom is taking extreme measures to her academic freedom marches: no personal ID, no cell phone, and wearing a face mask. As LGBTQ, she is very afraid. The other is noting the different level of risk arising as he helps stream peace movements for Palestinians and Jews in partnership. So it might be that we're just seeing that kind of divide, where some of us are making the cost benefit calculation and being very public about this, and some people are saying that it's not worth it right now. Ashley Young adds that the risk is we're only 4 months in, which is kind of mind blowing to realize, but that's quite true. And things are already developing very, very quickly. Right now, we're seeing the escalating fight between the Trump administration and Harvard University. If you haven't been following this, the Trump administration issued a letter demanding lots and lots of interventions into Harvard's operations at multiple levels. Harvard's president refused. The Trump administration froze $2.2 billion in grants and apparently directed the IRS to suspend Harvard's nonprofit legal status right now. In the chat, one person, I won't name her unless you want me to, said that they have a brand new 4-month-old baby. They can't risk being disappeared or retaliated against. Greg Britton shares an op-ed by M. Gesson from the New York Times from last week, which I commend to you as well. Tony Sindelar adds that there's a lot of fear and people feeling alone, isolated, and vulnerable. And community and collaboration is always the counter to that. Here, Tony. Agreed. Agreed very much. And our good friend Mark Rush, the other end of Virginia from us, adds that it's important not to dismiss all campus conservatives. They are diverse too, which is very, very true. Of course, Mark is, among other things, professor of law and poli-sci, so he knows this very, very well. Now, since I didn't have an agenda for this meeting, besides bringing some experts in to share their thoughts, I would like to make sure this is as open as possible for people to share their thoughts, their concerns. So if there's something that we haven't talked about yet in terms of how academic labor is being impacted by the Trump administration, please hit the chat box, or if you like, use the Q&A box. And of course, we're very happy to hear your voice, quite literally. So if you'd like to turn on your mic or turn on your camera, we'd be glad to hear and see you. Meredith Goldsmith offers this important point. Part of what's happening is that we've othered ourselves. Academia has been isolated and separate. while autonomous is also fractured from within. This is the time to get beyond competition and move towards something more collaborative. Meredith, by competition, you mean competition between academic institutions?
Yes. I mean, I think we can all think of examples of a competition with, peers in our sector, but I've also been following the CUNY boycott of Columbia, and
Yeah.
the Columbia response, which I imagine has long historic roots in New York City. But I just think this is a perfect example, you know, of a moment where we really need to start working beyond, some of the boundaries of our campus and think about the effect. I mean, a boycott may have a complete, a purely symbolic effect, but I think right now the optics of institutions turning against each other and departments and disciplines turning against each other,
Mm,
are something we really need to work against.
I I thought there was a piece in the New York Times this morning, a column by a Columbia professor calling for an end to the boycott. I couldn't find it just now, but if someone wants to find that and share it, that would be the case. So this is a time for solidarity, a time for unity, time for reaching out across those divisions. Meredith, where have we found you today?
Oh, it appears to be, I'm in Philadelphia, but I think what's behind me is AI Philadelphia because
Oh,
some of it is new and some of it is old.
understood, understood. There's a wonderful bit from the end of the movie, Gangs of New York, where it's the last minute of the movie where main characters have a fist fight and it's brutal and they stop. And you see behind them New York City in 1863. And then it fast forwards that vision year by year. And you see the city rise and grow and rise and grow all the way to the present, which I've always been very moved by. Um, well, let me keep you up here for a bit more, Meredith, because I really appreciate that point. We have folks have been adding a whole bunch of good comments and thoughts, and I'd like to add some of them. And they might be going too fast for even me to keep up with. Um, uh, Paula, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to read that link until after it, but if you want to summarize it or give us a sentence about it, that would be good. Karen Belnier asks if anyone getting messaging about the challenges of being political and nonprofit status. I haven't now, but have heard it in the past. Karen, the one that I've heard of is for Harvard University. I haven't heard of anything else yet today, but I may have missed something. So if anybody has seen anything else about that, please chime in the chat. Melanie Hogue notes that it may be in play are institutions that have personal social media policies for their staff, and that does not include faculty. This is a really good point. George Station adds that California has an active right to mask bill in the current session. This one host will guide updates to in time, place, and manner regulations. And George gave us helpfully a link to the actual law itself. Thank you. Mark Rush offers another point. He thinks academia is also fixated on the present and the short term. Not to dismiss the impact of the administration's action, but what is the long-term political agenda here? Academia will outlast Trump. That's a good question. And I wonder what ideas that this short-term immediate resistance or immediate organization is surfacing that might point towards longer term ideas. It might be the thinking of academic work as labor might be one of those. Paula Russell adds something that we haven't mentioned yet. We haven't really gone through the list of all the different actions the Trump administration has been taking against higher education. But Paula mentions 5 students at Binghamton University had their student visas revoked by the Trump administration. The State Department has been revoking visas for right now at least 1,600 students, according to Inside Higher Ed's tracker. If you haven't seen the tracker, it's essential. It's a very, very useful tool. It's very sobering. And that number is probably too low because it doesn't just, there are those that we haven't heard from yet. The number is growing. Secretary of State Rubio was pretty enthusiastic about this, saying that he would do more and more. And those numbers seem to just be rising right now. So It's important to think about anybody who is trying to act on this day, who does have immigrant status in various ways. They're running serious risks. And the risks aren't only, deportation isn't only for political statements, it's also been for other infractions. So there was one student who apparently was deported for a parking violation. There's a story out of Utah this morning about a student who was being deported for a fishing license problem. Tony Sindelar refers to our good friend and Inside Higher Ed columnist, Josh Kim, by saying that he said something effective: the institutions of higher education might mostly be fine. It's the people that will suffer. And that's got to be the case. I mean, so many of us run the risk of some kind of immediate damage to our reputation, to careers, to employment. And beyond that is the simple psychological wear and tear of trying to grapple with this ongoing crisis. Phil Katz adds there's a general threat against tax exempt status for political actions floated at the start of the Trump administration. Phil, was that aimed mostly at NGOs or nonprofits per se, or does that include higher ed?
It was not clear. It was something that the National Council for Nonprofits and a few other groups who watch that sector had on their radar, but it was not clear. I think NGOs were the prime target, but it was, painted with such a broad brush that what's happening to Harvard now certainly falls within the ethos of that move.
Thank you. Thank you. Of course, Harvard is one campus out of roughly 4,000. Let's dwell on that point about international students some more. We have Mark Rush offering this assessment that targeting international students is easy pickings for the administration. Trump can claim that he took some immigrant scalps. That's a way of framing that then, and appeal to his base. But come 2026, that base is going to want to know about inflation and jobs. I do wonder also what happens to international enrollment, just how many, what these actions are going to do to applications to American colleges and universities, as well as to actual enrollment, just how far summer melt will go by the time classes start in August or September. Brent Presley says that as a small technical college in Wisconsin, we have a student receiving visa inquiries. I was hoping we were too small to be a focus, but apparently not. Oh, damn, Brent. I'm sorry. That's rough. And then Tony Sindelar shared a link from Deseret News. Thanks, Tony. For a fishing violation. Yeah. Tom tries to cheer us up with a Soylent Green joke. That always works. That's only good for me. But Janet Scannell, on a more serious point, says it feels like a difficult time to see common ground. There's a firm polarization of liberal versus conservative. And to be honest, those are easier to define and to champion. And with the extreme actions of the Trump administration, we do need to react and defend against the illegal and inhumane. Yet I fear that polarization won't lay a path that is good for our country or for higher ed. It's a good observation, Janet. Thank you. How do you think, if I can respond to your comments, how can we in higher education best proceed along those ways? A lot of higher education has been working to have difficult conversations and cross opinion conversations. Organizations like the American Association of Colleges and Universities have been supporting this idea for higher education for a while. How can we do this when we are in a hyperpolarized time? And if you can't answer, if your mic isn't on or anything, that's okay. Just let me know.
Brian,
Yes.
so far we have not canceled or changed any of our programming that's around feminist studies, events, and so on. What we call JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and DIB. So far we've not changed any of those presentations. I think it's still going forward at this point in time. Again, we're private, but
I appreciate that. Also an awesome name. I mean, a JEDI is that's a brilliant acronym.
that's why they chose it, to resonate with the students.
Oh, the students too. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's why.
Thank you,
Hey,
Mom.
Brian, if I could say something regarding
Please,
your
please.
question and this point that came up about polarization, I'm thinking about the data always come up, like when, you do interfaith, Interfaith America has done really wonderful surveys on campuses around this on students, in attitude and ability to talk across difference. And they're always interested, engaged, want to talk across difference, whether it's race, gender, national, other forms of identity, and have the most reservations talking about politics. And from what I hear from the Interfaith America folks, that's like standard. So that's a national campus phenomenon that we're dealing with, that I think speaks to the point that was just raised in the chat, and perhaps Mark Rush's point about how did higher ed leave itself so vulnerable, you know, to these kinds of attacks. So I think it's just something that we have to think about. And like, I don't think there are easy answers to this question, but I mean, I think that it's going to involve a reorientation of faculty labor, that's part of our job, you know, to teach students how to have these conversations,
Oh, I see. I see what you mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
in a polarized environment.
How do you think we can do this? I mean, structurally, I mean, is this a case where academic deans, VPs of academic affairs should hold, institutes or training sessions or meetings, or should a group like American Council of Education, somebody, create online learning for this? What do you think?
I think there have to be lots of approaches. I mean, I was just thinking on my own campus, there was a conversation yesterday about, authoritarian, education in authoritarian regimes.
Mhm,
And from
mhm.
one perspective, that's like locking the barn door. Um, and after the horse is gone.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I think it's something we have to be really proactive, and it's something that needs to be co-curricular as well as curricular. Like, we make so
Mm.
many spaces for students to have these conversations, and we don't necessarily think about facilitating these conversations, toward this end of helping students talk across polarization.
And that's hard. That's very
It's very
risky.
hard. It's very, very hard.
Can I jump in here, Brian? This is Libby Roderick.
Yeah, hi, Libby.
Hi, Brian, and everybody. Just for whatever it's worth to you, since I've been the director of something called the Difficult Dialogues Initiative for over 20 years, right? And
Perfect.
the
Perfect.
Ford Foundation funded these a billion
That's
years
who I
ago.
was thinking of.
Yeah,
Yes.
in a better era, right? And so I work with faculty across the nation on how to have these conversations in classrooms, but I'm also the co-founder of something called the Difficult Dialogues National Resource Center, which has been around about 12 years now. We're hosting a conference in Wash U in late June, and it's speaking sort of directly to all these topics. It's an affiliation of universities across the nation who are trying to up the skill level of universities across the nation for engaging in difficult dialogues. And so we have communities of practice. We offer free webinars all throughout the semesters and so forth and so on. It's called the DDNRC, the Difficult Dialogues National Resource Center. There's some resources there. I have free books that we put up there from our program on how to engage difficult dialogues. So there are resources, there are conversations, and we've had a couple webinars over the last semester where we specifically invited non-campus nonprofits, which are springing up all over the place. You know of some of them: Braver Angels, Building Bridges, Unify America. There's any number of them, right? And we had them come talk in our webinars about talking across political difference specifically for this reason. We have recordings of those things. So I'm going to put my email in your chat, and people are welcome to contact me, and I'll try to hook you up with some of these resources if you like.
Perfect. Perfect. I'm so glad you could join us, Libby. I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing I was hoping to hear from.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. And if there's anything you want to toss in the chat box, please feel free to. Belatedly, I'm sharing that this is from our earlier conversation about a folder where people are archiving images and documents from today's actions. I just shared a link to that in the chat, so you can find posters and photos and that kind of thing.
Brian, if I could weigh in, I think
Please.
I think the other thing that's hard about these, bridging differences is that there is a way in which the normative opinions in higher ed believe that there is some right and wrong that is kind of associated with the political polarized ends of the spectrum, right? And that whether it's right now we just have the problem with what's truth and where are you getting your data from, and I have people in my department who didn't want to take diversity training because they felt like their job was telling them how to think and how to feel, and and so how do we create an environment where we can recognize each other's perspectives and truths when we feel like there's an absolute truth that maybe not everybody is sharing, right? But yet we feel like there are absolutes. And I think that makes it complicated. And I have one brother who I disagree with politically. And we have to tread fairly carefully on what we can talk about or not talk about. And my main guideline with him is that I won't debate his feelings, but I will debate his facts. And anyway, I think that some of the opinions about higher education aren't all wrong about whether all points of view are welcome.
Yeah. When I've heard conversations like this, they'll sometimes turn on edge cases or extreme cases. So someone will say, well, we don't allow a Holocaust denier to teach history, for example, or we won't allow a flat earther to teach geography. And I think everyone can agree on that being, a right thing. But when we're talking about more contentious things, especially social things, so you think about definitions of gender, definitions of racism. Kenan, I'm sorry, please join us. Please on mic. I'd much rather you.
Okay. So I've been grappling over here with what I want to say and how I want to say it, but just leveraging off of what Dr. Scannell and Jenna just said. One of the metrics that is often missing so I work from the sciences and looking at sort of systemic change in science. This idea that we came to through a long sort of learning journey together is to first stop the harm. So one of the metrics ought to be is harm being done to other people. So for instance, somebody that doesn't want to go through DEI training doesn't want to be told how to think, but if there's a place where harm's being done because of their actions, because of how they're being, that's a legitimate thing to bring up. And one of the things I've witnessed over many years, my partner had been one of the leading founders of one of the leading Silicon Valley law firms. And I was present for many conversations with some of my academic family members and other people in academia. And there's a hubris from the academic side about how it's this institution that will always go on, that really won't collapse, that doesn't need to change. But even within the institution, you can find you don't have to scratch very hard, especially in the sciences. And I don't know how it is in other domains, but you don't have to scratch very hard to find people that have been harmed by the current modalities of hyper competition. I mean, if you look at the Postdoc Association, if you look at sort of the living wages issues, family leave and medical, the graduate student, the whole situation for grads in STEM, there's a lot of not good stuff that's been going on for a long time that has led to unions and it's led to other things. So I think some self-reflection and some stepping back from hubris to consider change from within and why people might be mad. I hesitate to say this because usually there is this protectionism that, you know, there's so many good things about higher ed. There is so much to protect, but the inability to consider that there might be parts that are not working for everyone, that one's a hard one. That's a hard bridge to cross.
Well, that's really well said, Ken. I don't know if you've had a chance to see some of the chat. There've been some discussions that line up along that, questions of academic isolation, and also elitism. And we've hosted over the years, we've hosted several different guests who have written books or thought heavily about this. Kathleen Fitzpatrick, for example, has a really, really sweet book called Generous Thinking, where she reminds us to, you know, reduce the barrier between town and gown, so that we can hear people and contribute more effectively. Thank you for saying that. And we had in the chat a running discussion about deportations, and it's gone a few ways. We had an anonymous commentator who said that don't forget that faculty and staff who are here on green cards or naturalized citizens aren't safe either. Quite true. And Nicholas Quake says citizens aren't 100% safe either. I haven't heard or watched the video yet. I've only read the transcription where President Trump speculated about opening prisons in El Salvador to send U.S. citizens there. Again, I haven't seen the video. I'm just going by transcripts. But that would be a bit of evidence in your favor, Nicholas. Gene Myers said, I overheard a faculty member saying they canceled a research trip because of fear of not being allowed back into the U.S. Yeah. Heard other cases like this of people refusing to travel to the U.S. I mean, this is happening at a general level. Tourism to the U.S. has fallen off a cliff, but also academics not going to the U.S. because they're afraid of mistreatment and sometimes being turned away.
Brian, can I add something to that?
Please, please
Well,
go ahead.
I'm at the University of Buffalo in Buffalo, New York,
Hi.
which we could literally throw a rock to the Peace Bridge to
Yeah.
Canada.
Yeah.
So I think anybody who's living near borders, it's amazing how many are affected and are going to be affected because Peace Bridge people travel across all the time right near Niagara Falls.
Mm-hmm.
And we have students, Canadian students that just, we're 20 minutes away, so they buzz over. But I can't help but wonder, like, what is the end goal here? I just heard on our local news that the traffic, one thing that's nice is real hard data, and I have a bunch of research people on here with me. You can count cars over a bridge.
Right. Easily. Yeah.
There isn't any cleaner data than that.
True.
Count the cars.
Yeah.
And I heard the other day that the count was down almost close to 40%.
Oh.
So if you don't think that all that's going on here has an effect,
Yeah.
and that's a real hard number that no one can really deny. You're going to tell me there's more or less cars that went over there, but anyways, it is affecting both students and faculty who ordinarily saw our Canadian-US border as a friendly thing. And that has absolutely and unequivocally completely changed.
Elbows up on the Canadian side.
Mm-hmm.
Jean, did I tell you one of my undergrad students got a history degree from University of Buffalo?
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
He had a really good experience. So it's one of the many positive associations I have with your.
Thank you. Well,
thank you, Jean, for that example. And one of the great things about the Future Transform community is that you are all, when you're within the U.S., and not everybody is, we are a very global audience, but also within the U.S., we're so geographically distributed. So this gives us many, many eyes on this national problem from many different points of view. I was mentioning chat comments about the broader issues, thinking about Mark Rush's idea that we look at the longer term picture. And it was Christina Setzikorn who had this very good comment. She was thinking about the current environment results from our leaving behind educationally half the population, so that they are not critical thinkers. They are vulnerable to political hate propaganda. I tend to think everybody is vulnerable to propaganda, but leaving behind half the population, this is a really important point, Christina. Thank you. Greg Britton adds that higher ed became a luxury good, affordable for only some families. If you read my blog, you know I've been following one luxury good aspect, which is the total price of attendance or total cost of attendance. And two Northeastern universities have cracked the $100,000 per year barrier this year for the first time. So again, thank you, Jean. The chat is becoming a graduate seminar on higher education policy now. Phil Katz shares a great note about tax exemption and political rage. Mark Rush gives us data about visa denials and deportations. Sarah Sangorio points out federal funding issues. This is just terrific. We have 8 minutes left.
Brian,
Make sure that we get to people. Yeah, please, whoever that was.
that was me, Brian Mark. I just wanted to touch upon that, the numbers,
Okay.
because it's kind of something to keep in mind. And I find a direct international ed here. Spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks trying to put cold water on scared students who are being basically scaremongered. My office provides them with data and they know what's going on. And it's important to keep some of this in context. The media is focusing more on academia now because Trump is, but it's important to note that we've been averaging 600,000 deportations, returns per year for well over 20 years.
Well, that's nationwide, the total.
Nationwide, sure.
Okay.
And, this power was given to the State Department back in 1952. So this is old. I mean, this predates Cuba, everything else. And it is astonishing when you read this to see just how discretionary this power is. At the border, somebody can stop someone from trying to come in who's not a citizen. So it's powerful stuff when you look at this in perspective. Also, the number of F1 visas for international students, their denials has tripled as a percentage over the last, since 2014. So what's been going on what's going on now has been going on. It's just that now the media is bringing our attention to it, essentially because Trump's focusing on it more. But it's important to keep that in mind. It's what we don't know, to me, that's even more frightening, that this has been going on, and it's only now that Trump focuses on it that we're really paying attention to it. So just some numbers to keep that in mind.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this work. This is a tough time to be working the international study right now. In the chat, we have Meryl Krieger circling back to Jeanette Scannell, saying that she's been going down the rabbit hole about this concept of truth for a course that she teaches on conspiracy theory. Meryl, have you used Jesse Walker's book on conspiracy theories? It's a delightful book. He's a friend of mine. I'd be happy to put you in touch if you like. Sorry. What she's found is that truth is actually defined as something people agree on, and that fact is what is known or proven to be true. And that circular thinking is part of why and how we got to where we are. Outside academia, the understandings of truth and fact are very different from how they are understood within the academy. This is very, very true. Thank you. Vanessa Vale asks if it's time for samizdat. If you don't recognize the term, this is the underground literature that was produced and consumed during the Soviet period on all kinds of extravagant ways. And if surveillance expands, it may indeed be that time. I'd like to make sure that people who have their thoughts and concerns about this topic, but also any of their notes about this day of action, if they participate in any events that they'd like to share, if they have any recommendations, please either jump in the chat or just unmute your mic. George Station adds his note that several Canadians in higher ed have changed their travel plans, in one case declined a significant U.S. employment offer. This will have longer term effects. Yeah, one side of that is, I don't know if you've all been seeing this, several different countries, universities have been advertising for American scientists, from Australia to France to Canada. Phil Katz says he still loves Canada. That's good. That's good. Glad to have that. Ben Harwood says he commutes daily on the main interstate I-87 between New York City and Montreal. Lately, it's rare to see Quebec license plates. Wow, that is definitely a sign. P.F. Anderson, hello. Good to hear you in Ann Arbor. They said that they've had stories locally of folk who have taken the wrong turn trying to get to the grocery store, ended up on the bridge over to Canada, then in ICE custody for 5 days. So if you, in the Detroit area, it's really easy to get over the Canadian border in terms of driving. It's integrated right into the highway net, into the road net. So this can happen pretty easily. That's a stark thought, PF. Thank you for sharing that link there too. Greg Britton adds very, very useful data saying that international students make up about 5.6% of the 19 million college students in the US, but they're almost always full pay. At some universities, it's a much higher percent. We should expect that number to fall dramatically. I'm curious if people have any data about how international enrollment dropped during Trump's first administration. Ed Webb, our dear friend at Dickinson College, says that at their tuition-dependent liberal arts college, international students are generally around 12 to 18% of the student body. We will have real financial challenges as numbers drop. Libby Roderick wants to know about the person who was teaching conspiracy theories. She wants to just connect with them. So if you could just add a note in the chat about that. Tony Sendelar, who has just been thinking and posting so brilliantly in the chat, says, evergreen advice. This is a really rough time to be a student. Keep that in mind next time you are interacting with a student who's acting in ways that are confusing or frustrating. Very good advice, Tony. Thank you. And some of us
Brian,
were those kind of students.
Brian, this is Libby again.
Hi.
I wanted to hear people confirm what I believe to be true, which is as the cost of higher education. So I come from Alaska. It's a working class continent. Most people here are working class. And so the perception of higher ed that we talk about, that, it's for the elite or it's a luxury or so forth and so on, is, a conversation I'm familiar with. But I'm also wondering, the cost of higher ed has skyrocketed beyond many, many people's capacity. But my understanding is that that is because the federal government and our state governments used to subsidize higher education in ways that they no longer do. It's not, in my experience, that anybody around me is making a lot of dough at a university, at least not in the public ones that I know. It's not that we're, wantonly wasting money or spending it in crazy building complexes or anything like that. It's because there used to be a commitment in the US to public education, higher education, as well as K through 12. Is that other people's take?
Good question, Libby. What have the rest of you experienced and heard?
I guess I'll just follow up by saying, because I think classism is at the root of an awful lot of what's going on, right? Unaddressed classism, that the US has been pretty good about addressing lots of the other isms in recent times, but leaving classism out. And again, I grew up with a lot of people who would feel very left behind, white folks, in addition to other folks, because of that we don't talk about the fact that there is an active oppression. It's called classism, that ruins people's lives as much as all the other isms do. And so then when something like higher ed becomes expensive, they can't go, but it's becoming expensive because of this unwillingness to subsidize it and the desire to privatize everything, coming primarily, I would say, from the right.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody from the lower 48 want to chime in? Tony Sindelar offers this take, Libby. It's a combo of drop off of fundings, the amenities arms race, cost of services, cost of compliance. I think he's referring to regulatory compliance. Schools have to do more than they used to. They want to do more than they used to, and do it without as much government money as possible. Also, a really good answer. Catherine Navarro has a link here. Stephen Crawford offers an almost utopian alternative that the Arizona State Constitution states that university instruction shall be as nearly free as possible. Nearly free as possible is, I'm afraid, where we've just ended up. Here on the East Coast of the United States, it's 3:01, which means we have blasted past our hour of conversation. I hope we've explored some of these issues about academia and the Trump administration. I think we've covered a pretty wide range of areas, from the nature of collaboration to respecting students, to international enrollment, to deportations, to questions of truth and reputation, and quite a bit more. I'm really glad that you all felt that you could share and trust in this environment. I think it says a lot to how all of you get to act and work together. I hope this was of use to you all. Please let me know. If this is something you'd like to see us do more of, again, please let me know. It's really important that this venue serves this community, especially in such a challenging time. We have scheduled a whole series of sessions coming up into May, June, and July on a wide range of topics. You can find them out on the website, and of course, you can find them out as we email you updates about them. I hope we've gotten some clarity. I hope we've gotten some support. Above all, I want to thank you all for being with us and thinking with us together in this difficult time. Take care, everyone. Please be safe, and we'll see you next time online. Bye-bye.